Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This session is part of the 24-hour Global Peace Conference. My name is Jose Barzola from the Matsunaga Institute for Peace at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Today's event will focus on Indigenous perspectives on environmental conflict resolution with Maya Sekine, Joseph H. Suina, and Mahina Tuteur. It will be an analysis of the Indigenous perspective of conflict caused by or exacerbated by environmental change and peace building within the same context. We will explore how environmental conflict resolution has affected the Ainu communities in Japan, as well as the Cochiti Pueblo communities in New Mexico, in the United States of America, and as well as the Kānaka Maoli communities in Hawaii. Today, we'll start today's event by introducing our moderator, Mirali Shukla, who's interested in the bioculture conservation field through studying the linkages between Indigenous and local communities and the environment. Mirali hopes to further understand how this relationship can affect conservation, human rights, and conflict resolution. Then our panelists today will be Maya Sekine, who was born and raised in the Nibutani area of Miratori town in Hokkaido, where 70 to 80% of the population are Ainu. Approximately 400 residents in Ainu culture remain strong. Currently, Maya majors in policy management at Keio University and belongs to the university's Ainu Language Club. Maya promotes the Ainu language as a living language. She was awarded first prize twice in the Ainu speech contest. Maya was also an instructor of Ainu language lessons on STV radio in 2018. Her voice has been used for the announcement of Donan buses, which serves the Hidako region of Hokkaido. Maya and her friend started their Shito channel on YouTube to promote the Ainu language and culture to a wider audience in Japan. Her channel has close to 10,000 subscribers now. Joseph H. Suina is a professor emeritus in the College of Education at the University of New Mexico with 25 years of service. He directed the Institute for American Indian Education at UNM for tribes throughout the Southwest. Dr. Suina's publications on culture and education American issues are numerous. As a current member of the several boards and committees, he provides a voice for Native people in the areas of health, museum, language retention, sacred sites, economic development, and housing. Dr. Suina is an adjunct professor for Colgate University in New York and teaches Native American studies and education. Dr. Suina has maintained strong ties to Cochiti Pueblo throughout his academic career. He's a former governor and current tribal council member, elder for the tribe. He provides guidance in the ways of tradition and culture for Mahina Tuteur is a post-Juris Doctor research and teaching at Kai Huli Au Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law, William X. Gibson School of Law. She gained experience with legal and political advocacy, working with several community and governmental organizations during law school, and graduated with certificates in Native Hawaiian and environmental law. Mahina coordinates various research and scholarship projects, including the second revised edition of the Native Hawaiian Law, a treatise, facilitates community outreach and legal trainings, and teaches clinical standard courses. She serves as a state of Hawaii Environmental Council and is currently pursuing her PhD in Indigenous Politics at UH Manoa. And to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to our friend today, Mirali.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today first, and thank you so much to our panelists who have so kindly agreed to share with us today. Indigenous peoples, local and marginalized communities are increasingly recognized as being especially vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. According to several studies, however, they seem to be the fraction of human appropriators of biomass determining the lowest ecological impacts. As the impacts of climate change industry and conservation efforts continue, we recognize Indigenous and local communities as arbiters of effective change with unique worldviews, specialized environmental knowledge, and generational wisdom. Indigenous peoples live in and have special claims to territories that, in many cases, harbor exceptionally high levels of biodiversity. And on a global basis, human cultural diversity is associated with the remaining concentrations of biodiversity, but both cultural diversity and biological diversity are endangered. And today, we will be hearing short 10-minute interviews by 3 people with insight into this by asking them to reflect on the unique role Indigenous and local communities have in the combating of environmental change and how their own communities have been affected by the effects of environmental change. And Maya, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you for inviting me. Ilan karapte kwena. Sekine Maya Sekine Enuya. Can you hear me? Enuya Shishrim kapet hontomutan, niptai, pipaushkotan. コアパマカプクね。だね、神奈川県をった慶應義塾大学をったカラパコロ、マカナクキヤクナピリカのアイヌタクネヤカ、アイヌプリネヤカ、クトクエ歌っとらのマカナクキヤクナピリカのクピラサヤシカイカ、ケアイコシラムスイパクね。上向きりやんな。So now I introduce myself in Ainu language and next English. I'm not good at English, but I tried. I was born in a small town called Nibutani in Hokkaido, where 70 to 80% of the population are Ainu. There are about 300 residents, so very small town. Ainu culture remains strong here, and it's a place where we Ainu can learn about our own culture and traditional stories. So in Nibutani, I grew up with my many friends and family around me and lived closely with nature. After school, we would go to the river to catch the fish. In the winter, we used to, in the winter, would hunt deer's meat. And in the spring, the whole of my family would go out together and pick up the wild vegetables. So of course, there was a TV at home and I played games, but I lived in an environment where I was exposed to a lot of plants and animals in my surroundings. So some pictures out here. So in Nibutani, this is a, can you see these pictures? This is Nibutani. So this is a, how to say, this is a mountain. This is a holy mountain, like a, and also Nibutani has a lots of traditional houses. Our ancestors lived here, and Nibutani, and sometimes my family and friends like this kind of dance in front of this house. And when I was a child, I went to the mountain with my family and to take a tree bark to make some weavings. So right now I study at Keio University in Kanagawa, few pictures. At the university, I also study more about Ainu language and culture with my friends. I enjoy learning the Ainu language as a living language. My friends and I studied Shito channel. So Shito channel is a this is my channel, YouTube channel. Sometimes I try to make an English one, like this one. North biggest island called Hokkaido. My family is from a small town called.
It is an Ainu language but changed a little so Japanese can easily pronounce.
For example, the biggest city at. Can you see my YouTube channel? Yeah, thank you. So this is my actions. So the word Ainu has so many deep meaning. For example, Ainu means human, and only people who are respectful and people whom we can trust and call people or Ainu. So good people is Ainu. So my family told me that no matter where you are from, no matter what your blood is, and no matter where from. So if you are a good human, you are Ainu. So that Ainu also believe everything has a ramat. Ramat means soul, so like a spirit. So we have to respect everything around us, even small rocks, even tables, even waters, So everything has a limit. I like this kind of thinking. Our ancestors taught us this kind of thinking, and I want other people to know about this too. When I think about nature and the environment, I can see that there are much less deer in forests today than before. It's also getting harder to pick the wild plants compared to the past because of the human impact. And some people don't know about the mountains rules. Because of the lack of materials, we now have to pay money to buy the materials we need to make crafts, and Ainu's traditional house is also, this also limits our culture. To not make these issues worse, I think it's important to everyone to understand their roles and position in the world. Not only humans, but animals, plants, and objects, and also things. And to think about things from their perspective. And also we have to respect that. For that reason, we need to understand each other, talk about what environment is best for each other, and have communication with each other is important, I think. Also, I think we need good running environment to share our ancestors' wisdom to future generations. Ainu doesn't have written language, so Ainu has a lot of oral histories and oral sing and dance. So this has a lot of wisdoms. I think there is a lot I learned about how to live with nature from being Ainu. For example, ever since I was a child, I used to take a net and go catch fish after school. When we caught fish, we will flush like a stomach their intestines into the river, return the river, where they will be eaten by foxes or used as food for other fish. So there was no such thing as waste. These things I learned from my family because it was taken for granted that humans were a part of nature. There is no word in the Ainu language that can be directly translated into nature. I think I think this is important and this is very interesting. So I think it's necessary to reconsider the words that we now take for granted, such as living in harmony with nature and preserving nature, and to rethink our individual values. In this way, we can learn a lot about our values from our Ainu language and culture. And this is why I love the Ainu language. And I'm still studying it from my family. Even though there is a lot I can learn from my Ainu culture, I think there is no one answer to fix climate change. The values of the Ainu can teach us a lot. So Ainu values and Ainu thinking teach us a lot. We need to try and understand more. And I think it's important to think about what it means to live a good life. This is what I try to do. So thank you very much. And やいらいけれありがとうございます。I'm so nervous. So
No, you did so well. Thank you so much, Maya. That was amazing. And we so appreciate your insight. That was wonderful. I'll turn it over now to Joseph. Oh, sorry, Joseph, I think you're muted.
Got it. Thank you for giving me the honor of joining the Global Conference on Peace. I am coming to you from Cochiti Pueblo, Southwest United States, in the state of New Mexico. I am a member of the Cochiti Pueblo Indian tribe, or Native American tribe. There are 19 different pueblos in New Mexico, and we consider ourselves sovereign nations, descendants of the cliff dwellers of Mesa Verde and Bandelier. These are important sites, well known, I think, throughout the world, and the great houses of the Chaco Canyon. 1,000 years ago, our people migrated to the Rio Grande area, probably because of drought and other resources that were being depleted in that area. About 400 years later or so, we were invaded by the Europeans. And so the Spaniards were first on the scene and the colonizers of our people early on. Many people think that we were passive and dominated and totally subdued, but not at all. We took our language, our culture, our religion underground. And these were targets of the Spaniards and the Christian missionaries to uproot, to replace with Christianity. But in the process, we held on to these things that were important to us. And coming from an area where the environment was everything to us, it was our medicine, it was our food, it was our recreation, it was our sacred sites, our places of worship, holy grounds, and so forth, our hunting areas. All of those, of course, were dear and near to us. We survived off the land. So those teachings that were 1,000 years ago, when there was no Walmart or McDonald's and that sort of stuff, everything came off the land. So today we are still connected to our ancestral spirits in the Four Corners area. We still continue to practice our traditional, our religion, our ceremonies, our dances, and continue to use the ways of life of the old people in our approach to the environment. So I think what we have is a knowledge base that is very congruent with life itself in the environment. And life meaning all of plant life, animal life, but including the soils, the minerals, the water that's there. And so today, a lot of our ceremonies, our dances, our songs are connected to, first of all, Thanksgiving, appreciating what we have, no matter how meager it might be, but we are fortunate to have whatever it is that we have here and now. Second, then to petition, the Creator and the Holy Spirit to provide for us what we need, and just what we need. We don't need any more than what we really need. And so ours is not tied up in making money or putting away a bundle just for ourselves, but because we grew up in communities in semi-desert areas, agriculture made possible for our people to grow into large villages and communities. As a result of that, we also developed our traditional governments, our social organizations, our religious and relationships were formed within this community. And sharing is a very important quality of our community today, still today. We still have a community cornfield, and the community cornfield is for, in the event, as it was 1,000 years ago, that we should face famine of any type, drought, once again, we would have something for our people. And so to be together as a community, and my particular community isn't very big, Cochiti Pueblo, I think we have about 1,500 to 2,000 people living here, probably that many more living off the reservation, off the Indian land in cities and throughout the world and so forth. But those people that do live here, we still carry on our traditional governments, and our language, of course, is still intact. So we have 19 other Pueblo communities throughout the state of New Mexico in similar situations with the similar beliefs and systems in place. Each and every one of those communities are separate, autonomous, and totally with their own systems of life, be that government, be that religion, be that social relationships or organizations of various sorts are all within those communities. But respect for one another, respect for the environment, and certainly for the waters that flow through our communities. We have the Rio Grande River coming right just about a mile from where I'm sitting in my home in Cochiti Pueblo. And I just wanted to share that the environmental impact that most hit Cochiti, like all the rest of the world, of course, we have similar impacts of climate change and so forth. But in Cochiti, we have a huge dam that was created by the United States government, right in the heartland of Cochiti Pueblo. And this dam is a monster, to say the least. It is the 11th largest or 10th largest earth-filled dam in the world, and it's patterned after a dam in Egypt. And it is an earth-filled dam. And the other thing that you need to understand is that Los Alamos Labs, the place where the atom bomb was created, is 15 miles from our home, and it's upstream from the dam. So the things that the stockpiles of uranium and other kinds of things that were pulled together in the late 40s and 39, 40s and so forth have been sitting on the hillsides of Los Alamos. And of course, a lot of that has washed down into the river and directly into the dam. So one of the things, of course, that has created for us in our community is a serious uptick in cancer rates of various sorts. That has happened. But another important thing that the dam has brought for us, so to give you an idea of the dam, it is 25 stories high, 252 feet at the center of the dam, and it stretches for 5 miles, 5.4 miles across, a huge mass of earth. But the waters could not be contained. And the belief of our ancestors is that the waters were cut off too long. The waters were cut off too long. To us, the water is like like the blood in our veins. You cannot put on a tourniquet for too long without damaging yourself. And in filling up the dam, of course, they had to shut the water down. And the flow of the spirit of the water, the Holy Spirit of the water itself, was contained too far and too long, is the belief. There was a sacred site right where the dam was being proposed. We did not agree to the dam, but we were threatened with a law that we have in the United States is under the eminent domain law. If it's going to be for the good of the people, larger population, and the law is that you can go ahead and do it anyway. Condemnation, we were threatened with. And so, like it or not, they proceeded with the dam. It was to take care of flooding downstream. And the flooding downstream, of course, were hurting small communities and so forth. But what they did not specify up front, of course, Albuquerque, the largest city in New Mexico, was growing by the leaps and bounds. I mean, by the thousands in the year's time. 2 important installations were there, the Sandia Labs and the Kirtland Air Force Base, close enough to Los Alamos so that if ever Los Alamos got attacked, we could have jets in the air not too far from the lab itself. So all of these things played in to the building of the dam. And in the end, that sacred site that we said no to many many ways and even staked out, was destroyed. It was destroyed. And it was a sacred site, not just to Cochiti Pueblo, but to many other Indian tribes. And they blamed us for it. They told us that we took money from the United States government. No, we didn't take anything from them to build that dam. The other thing that happened, so that was the first thing, the destruction of the dam. The second thing that happened is the seepage underneath the dam. It destroyed lands that what was left of our prime farming lands were destroyed. For 25 years, we had seepage happening, and the whole generation of farmers that were so critical to our way of life just totally unaccommodated. A whole generation growing up not knowing how to farm. We finally took the United States government to the courts. And before, in the 11th hour, we settled out of court, and we agreed to have them put in a seepage program, a system underneath the ground to take away waters, so that once again, our lands would be farmable. Well, we did that, but now we're finding out that that farmland the system is working too well. It takes away water that we use for irrigation too quickly in too many places. And so anything that we do and replace with human-made hands or technology is not equal to what Mother Nature had provided for us. We've had invasive species come into our area that weren't there before. The tamarask, the Russian olives, and all sorts of thorny brushes that have come in now. We've lost beautiful birds that used to be because there's no longer the natural restoration that flooding would provide. The sediments come from upstream and so forth. Mushrooms, silvery minnow, a fish that we used to enjoy, is now an endangered species in the United States. And so we have some serious damages that have occurred over the years. And then of course, the sediment that's sitting upstream from the dam. The dam itself today is rising in sediment at a very quick rate. And what's getting embedded in that sand just within the middle of the reservation, our homeland is the waste that is coming off of Los Alamos. Yes, there's a lot of restrictions today, and there's proper ways of storing and getting rid of atomic material that is not no longer of use, but we still have contaminants coming off the hills from many years ago. So we have that situation, we have that problem still today, but yet we as a Native people have and possess a knowledge and a way of life that is through song, through dance, the connection to the water, the spirit of the water, whether it's flowing, precipitation, the snows in winter, the rains in the summertime, we dance for, and always prayerfully as a community. So if you ever have a chance to visit one of the pueblos in the summertime, you will find hundreds of dancers in the plaza dancing to the beat of a drum, saying thank you to Mother Nature and asking, petitioning for the right conditions in our environment, our soils, our precipitation. Plant life, of course, is so important in our medicines still today, our food, but so is the elk, the deer, the antelope that we still hunt. And for each one of those, they are our brothers. We have a ceremony after a deer is brought home. The deer is shared with neighbors in the community, and in that way we celebrate together. And then a few months later, the deer's antlers is danced in the plaza to remind ourselves that it is this being, the deer, with its own spirit, who gave its life for us so that we could live. So we have, I think, certain knowledge and information and relationship to the environment that is so basic that I think we can have something to say about the environment in the world today. So with that, I'll go ahead and conclude my
Thank
sharing.
you so much. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And we really appreciate you being here today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mahina.
Thank you.
Okay, aloha everyone. My name is Mahina Tuteur. I'm going to share a short PowerPoint. Sorry. That is how I operate. Let's see here. And please interrupt. I'm one of those people that when I'm running a PowerPoint, I can't see anything on my screen. So today I'm going to be sharing just a little bit about climate change impacts on Kānaka Maoli cultural practices and the potential for restorative environmental justice. Mahalo for the opportunity to be on this panel, first of all, and reflect on these questions. I'm kind of focusing more on the second question and more current and projected impacts, looking to the future. So first of all, I have to preface too that I'm very much giving this presentation as a proxy for a much more esteemed scholar, Kapua Sprott, director of Kahuliao Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law at the law school here at UH Manoa. I worked on an article with her back when I was in law school. And my kuleana responsibility was to research and write up how climate change is and will impact specific cultural Hawaiian practices. So this is what I'm kind of focusing on for today's talk. So I'm going through these practices from Mauka to Makai, which is from the mountains to the sea, kind of providing both scientific and cultural context. I'm starting off with this image of an ahupua'a and a traditional land division, which were based on how water flowed from the mountains to the sea. And we've written about this issue together, specifically in the context of fresh water and kalo or taro cultivation. So I'll be giving a little bit more context around that practice. So here we go. So starting in the uplands or Mauka with the impacts on our upland forests. So as we all know, not only do healthy forests anchor the soil to prevent sediment from washing off the mountains into the ocean and destroying coral reefs and coastal fishing resources, but forests also feed the streams that enable agriculture to flourish and sustain indigenous and other communities. And here in Hawaii, our forests are quickly disappearing. Between 90 and 95% of Hawaii's dryland forests have already disappeared in the last century. Some wet native ecosystems at higher elevations may cease to exist by the year 2000, significantly altering the distribution and abundance of many of our native plants and animals. So for some cultural context, the misty uplands are referred to as Wauakua, or the realm of the gods, sacred to Ku, the god of war and governance. And many of the plants and animals inhabiting this area, the Wauakua, are considered kino lau, or the physical embodiment of spirit. Entry into the forest is considered, which is considered a sacred space, requires adherence to strict protocol. And so there are many examples of how climate change is already impacting our forests. Oh, sorry, I should mention that the forests are also very critical for the gathering of traditional healing plants used for la'au lapa'au, or traditional medicine. And another cultural practice that is impacted is hula, which we all know and love. It's a practice that has preserved oral traditions since ancient times. So although hula practitioners continue to gather plants for the necessary protocols, it's becoming more and more difficult to find the correct or plants for specific practices. Another example that I researched is the rapid loss of the Palila bird. So the loss of this bird, so in ancient times, when the Palila's whistle-like call was heard resounding through the forest, Kānaka knew that rain would soon fall. So I feel like the loss of this bird and many others, of course, basically kind of severs the connection between indigenous peoples and natural and cultural resources and these stories. So every time we lose a Hawaiian plant or bird, we lose a living part of our culture. The next part of that kind of ahupua'a is as the water flows from the forest down through, it passes from the Wauakua to the Waukanaka, which is the realm of man, where it sustains agriculture, aquaculture, and other human activities. So this area, kind of Mavaina, or kind of the middle, is where agriculture happens. And some scientific context here, a number of factors are already combining with the potential to destroy traditional Maoli agriculture. Scientists predict that the significant decline in rainfall, as well as reduced stream flow and groundwater, will likely parch the land in some areas, while increasing temperatures and rising seas will intensify saltwater intrusion and flood lowland plains favored for indigenous agriculture. So each of these trends pose serious threats to the replenishment and sustainability of Hawaii's water resources, to our farmers and food security, and to some of the most important Maoli cultural practices in existence today, including what is pictured here, which is kalo cultivation. In some more cultural context, so as Joseph said, in many ways, fresh water is the lifeblood of tremendous significance as a kinolau, or physical embodiment of the Akua Kane, one of the 4 major gods of the Hawaiian pantheon. In Olelo, Hawaii, Vai means fresh water and Vai means wealth. So already you can see how inextricably linked these two concepts are. Years of plantation agriculture in Hawaii, which required the diversion of streams, almost wiped out kalo cultivation. There were once over 200,000 acres in cultivation, and now there are less than 500. And a significant limiting factor is fresh water in streams. Kalo cultivation here has really become a rallying point for self-determination. And importantly, cultivation requires consistent supply of fresh water through lo'i, or wetland patches, as pictured here. Moving next down to Makai, or the coastal areas, which support a myriad of significant traditional and customary practices, including burying ancestral bones and cultivating salt, gathering sea life and maintaining fish ponds, and fishing and voyaging in the open ocean, which I just said there. Some scientific context, studies are showing that increasing temperatures are already altering marine species distribution, while the rise in atmospheric carbon dioxide is contributing to ocean acidification and significantly affecting coral reef growth. This is already impacting subsistence fishing, and changes in rainfall and extreme weather events are also leading to greater runoff of sediment and land-based sources of pollution, which negatively impact water quality and the nearshore marine area in general. So over the past century, I think 70% of Hawaii's beaches have eroded, and over 13 miles of beach have been completely lost to erosion. I already mentioned some of the practices on the left side there, but on the right side, cultivating pa'akai, or salt, this really exemplifies the struggle that many of our practices face. This practice only continues on one small sliver of coastal land in Hanapipi, Kauai, and it's managed by a core group of families who each cultivate their own lo'i, or salt pan. And changes in flooding patterns and temperature have really impacted how often and how much these families are able to cultivate year to year. So my big question, and what I'm really interested in, is, what does restorative environmental justice look like? I think a critical environmental justice framework has to start with the long-term impacts of colonialism. Thinking that justice is not just about the equality of treatment, but about self-determination for indigenous resources, and that state agencies have an affirmative duty to protect and preserve traditional customary practices, which is what I'm going to be talking about for just a little bit for the rest of the talk. So I want to mention just really quickly Hawaii's public trust doctrine. It comes from the Kumulipo, which is our creation story that gave birth to the idea that we have a kuleana for natural resources to protect them for future generations. And then this idea was enshrined in kingdom law, which said that the ali'i, or chiefs, had to manage resources for the greater society. And in effect, that the government is a trustee of resources for everybody. So this concept was enshrined in the Hawaii State Constitution in 1978, which says that the state has a responsibility to protect all of these resources listed here, and that all public natural resources are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the people. The second constitutional provision I'll mention really quickly is Article 12, Section 7 of the Hawaii Constitution, which says that the state must protect all rights customarily and traditionally exercised for subsistence, cultural, and religious purposes possessed by Ahupua'a tenants who are descendants of Native Hawaiians who inhabited the islands prior to 1778 or before Western arrival. Just concerning these last two constitutional provisions over the year, but I'll just mention one significant case really quickly that came out of the Hawaii Supreme Court in the year 2000, which said that the state and its agencies basically have an affirmative duty to preserve and protect Native Hawaiian traditional and customary rights and have the power to prevent any interference with the exercise of these rights. And importantly, it provided a protective and restorative decision-making framework through which courts could determine whether state and county agencies have been adequately discharging their duties. So I'll just list these out really quickly, what state and county agencies have to do when they're making decisions about permits that concern land, water, and cultural practices. So what does this mean in practice? In Hawaii, we have strong protections for Native Hawaiian traditional and customary rights on paper. And while Western colonization has caused drastic changes, the cultural practices that we have continue, and there's underlying guiding principles preserving these practices, and those remain in place today. So, sorry, before I get to the last part there, and we have these restorative justice principles that are underpinning our local legal regimes. So I'm trying to speak to that. So far, I've addressed the second question, and I think as to the first question, do you think Indigenous and local communities around the world have a unique role to play in the combating of environmental change? I think yes, absolutely. From on the ground organizing and educating to policy making, I think Indigenous communities have a hugely important role to play. So my focus for this kind of little part was that part of our kuleana responsibility is also to hold others accountable for their decision making. And in Hawaii, this means state and county agencies that make these decisions that impact our land, water, and cultural practices. And I think we have a responsibility to keep them accountable in a way that proactively protects these practices for future generations, utilizing precepts like the precautionary principle, which requires protection and conservation even in the face of scientific uncertainty. So to kind of end it, I'll leave it with an olelo no ia, which is makahana ka'ike, or the learning or knowing is in the doing. And because Native Hawaiians' identity as Indigenous peoples is inextricably tied to these islands and to our natural and cultural resources, I think place-based practices cannot continue without the resources to support them. These cultural practices are vital to connect contemporary Kānaka Maoli with our ancestors and are also crucial pieces of a reborn and thriving Indigenous economy. So with that.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful, and we really appreciate you saying all that and being here to present today. We're now going to spend 25 minutes in small groups with a facilitator just to discuss how your community specifically has been affected by environmental change and what steps we can take to best mitigate it. And then we'll return for 10 minutes so each group can share one idea discussed as a group. During your discussions, please identify one person to be the recorder who will paste notes about what you're talking about into the chat box during our main group discussion, and one reporter to report back. Also during your discussions, we ask that you embody the values of this conference, like open-mindedness and authenticity. So you're now going to be placed into a small groups with a facilitator, and Jose will kindly put the breakout instructions into the chat so everyone has them. Please remember your group number and have a great conversation. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you guys had productive conversations, and we're going to start calling on each of the reporters to share just one kind of top idea that they had, because of lack of time, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time here. So group one was my group, and I know Mino is our reporter, so if you would like to speak, I'll give it over to you.
Hi everyone, we've got 1 minute. So there were 5 of us in our group, and we started with Joseph that we heard earlier. We heard about the effects of the dam. I talked about the effects of sea level rise in the Pacific. We also heard about being an indigenous person in a city and the difficulties in connecting to nature and applying our indigenous ancestral knowledge. So we agreed that connection to land and nature and our ancestors and place is very important. And this is what is being lost. The environmental change effects are so far reaching. And it was suggested that we have more constructive dialogues like this, and that we're all connected. We're all connected through the sea as a Pacific person. The sea is what connects us. It doesn't separate us. We're connected through the air and we're connected through the earth. Yeah, we're all connected. So I think that's all I need to say.
Thank you so much. That's perfect. Group 2, do you have your reporter?
I don't remember what group number we were, Mirali. This is Ann
No-
Smoke.
Yeah,
no
we were
problem.
two. We were
Okay,
number
Bill,
two.
Bill Dunwoody, go ahead.
Yes. Let me get down here just for a second. Two screens and I got no room. So, okay. Basically, we identified there was. Let me see. There was Warren and. Let me see. I'm trying to remember.
It was Warren,
Bob,
Dasha,
and Bob.
Bill, and Bob.
Right. Okay. So I'm going around looking for the faces. So we had basically what we talked about in all of our areas. We were from Australia, Bolivia, United States, northeastern United States, and us. Let me see, Australia, Bolivia, and California. And we all had issues with fire, basically. So the issues that we identified were concerns of warming and water uses leading to fire issues or events. And we came up with basically just some very simple mitigating elements. Would be effective communications, listening to understand and listening to those who are impacted, making sure that it's a grassroots operation. There's a lot of conflicting thoughts, ideas, opinions, and we really think that we need to sit down first and talk about that and then move forward.
Thank you so much. That was very well said. Group 3?
I'm not sure which number group I was in.
You were actually part of group 3, Kawi. Yeah.
Just making sure. Okay, thank
No
you.
worries.
So I had Sala, Laura, Nicholas, Elsa, and Mahina in my group, and we talked about restorative justice and community integration and Malama, so give back to the land relating to the community. And so we had one gentleman from Australia, another from Fiji, or the same person. And then, so we came from different areas of the world, but we agreed that the planet is being troubled with like the 2 polar vortexes, and so acidic water and things, or water issues and land issues and fire issues. So our 3 main resolutions to solving these issues would be restorative justice, community integration, and Malama Aina, just giving back to the land instead of just taking and taking, as we've seen. And I'm trying to keep this short and sweet. I kind of know we're cautious on time, but I think that's all I really wanted to share today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Group 3. Anybody from Group 4, if you remember?
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm Chenshira. I'm from Group 4. and we have a really nice conversation with our members, Maya, Amit from India, Emily. So it basically talk about, Emily, she's from Australia, and she shared her opinion about massive bushfires, and her solution is to listen to the First Nation voices and so the organizations like Fire Stick Aliens, so they can like catch shift with the fire. And we also talk a lot about global warming and high sea level risks. And our solution is to reduce chemical emissions in factories and limited number of cars on the road, and also plant more trees. And we also have like listen to opinions from Maya, which she states that in order to build a mutual community, we have to have conversations with multiple community together so that we won't build our community by only one side's opinion. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for participating and joining us today and sharing your thoughts with us and each other. And if you have some time, we would very much appreciate it if you were able to fill out the survey about this event that we've put in the chat. And once again, thank you so much to our panelists for speaking today and giving us your time.